The Dallas Stars got absolutely embarrassed by the Vancouver Canucks on Sunday night. On today's show, I'll give you an entire breakdown of the game, talking about a lot of the things that I didn't like, which, like I said, there's a lot. A few of the things that I did like, and talk about some ways that Dallas can fix their team and their issues going into this upcoming homestand that they have this week. All of this and more on today's Monday edition of Locked On Stars.
Your Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to the Locked On Stars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I'm your host, Dane Lewis. It is Monday, November 8th. And it is very much a Monday, folks. The Dallas Stars, like I said, in the cold open, got absolutely embarrassed. One of, if not the worst loss of the season for the Stars so far at the hand of the Vancouver Canucks on Sunday to end their road trip in Western Canada. A game that, I really think that Dallas could have won, should have won, needed to win. Needed 2 points to keep pace with some of the top dogs in the Central Division. It was a game kind of going into it, I thought, anything less than 2 points is disappointing, and we absolutely need 2 points. But after seeing how the game went, even getting 1 point and losing in overtime or in a shootout would have been better than what we saw as the end result of Sunday night's game. And not only that, it started at 9:00 here in Texas time. So shout out to all my late night Stars After Dark fans that were up with me, trucking through that game, watching it. Thankfully, the Dallas Stars will not play on the West Coast every single game, because that would be quite the commitment. Did not realize how late that meant the game would go. But of course, glad to be with you on another week of Locked On Stars. Whether this is your first time listening or you are a recurring listener, thank you for stopping by the show. Thank you for making Locked On Stars your first listen of the day. Be sure to subscribe and follow the podcast wherever you get your podcast at. I make episodes every Monday through Friday, so you won't want to miss anything that comes out during the week, because I'm giving you guys Stars updates, content, insight Monday through Friday every single week. So be sure to subscribe, follow if you don't do so already, wherever you get your podcast at, as well as on YouTube. Jumping right into the meat of today's show, though, I want to just give you a breakdown of last night's game, talk about the things I saw, and really kind of in this first bit, talk about the things I didn't like, which was quite a few things, believe it or not, in an ugly 6-3 loss to the Vancouver Canucks. And the biggest of those things, the biggest takeaway from this game is penalties again. I feel like I'm talking about penalties a lot over these past few episodes, talking about when recapping games or breaking down games. But it stuck out like a sore thumb tonight, and is honestly probably the reason that Dallas lost this game for the most part. Dallas gave up 3 of their 5 goals on the penalty kill, while Vancouver was on the man advantage. They tallied up 6 penalties, giving up 12 penalty minutes. Just absolutely unacceptable. You can't expect to win hockey games when playing like that, especially against a team like Vancouver, whose power play has not been that good this season. I believe that they were like 25th in the NHL. Their percentage, they were at a 14% power play percentage going into tonight's game. I think that was 25th in the NHL before the game started. I'm sure it's changed now, because the way Dallas was playing and defending those power play opportunities, you would have thought, if you drop a hockey fan in who knew nothing about this season up to this point, you wipe their memory and you show them this game, they're like, oh, Vancouver's power play is probably the best in the league, because they were on fire tonight and they just seemed to, to not miss. I believe they went 3 for 6 on the power play, which is only 50%, but still to get 3, goals off power plays is really, really good for the Vancouver Canucks. Not good for the Dallas Stars. And it's weird because I feel like at the start of the season, Dallas's penalty kill was, a thing that we were talking about as a good thing, praising the team for. But now it's switched where the Stars power play is red hot, which is good, even though they don't seem to be drawing as many penalties or getting as many power play opportunities. But they've switched it, and now the penalty kill can't seem to really contain anybody, which is frustrating, especially if you're going to give up, 12 penalty minutes in a game. You just absolutely cannot have that. Super frustrating to watch. Dallas, lost this game because of penalties. Like I said, 3 of 5 goals given up. Dallas scores 3 goals on their own. So that leaves the game at least tied. Even if Dallas loses in overtime or a shootout, like I said, better to come away from this game with a point than nothing at all, which is what they came away with tonight. Nothing at all, and maybe even less than that, feeling morally defeated after getting embarrassed by a team that they were better than and absolutely should have and could have beaten. Yeah, penalties, man. We got to find a way to fix that. Absolutely cannot continue that trend, because apparently our penalty kill unit is not going to be able to keep up, or they're going to be wildly inconsistent this season. Maybe, in a few games it'll switch back where the power play can't get anything going, but the penalty kills killing it every night. That sounds like something that the Dallas Stars would do. So who knows what we're going to see as far as special teams goes for this Stars team as the season goes on. Another thing that was ugly in this game and has really been ugly for the Stars throughout the season is just how they play in the second period in every game. Dallas has been outscored after this game, if my numbers are correct, 16-6 in the middle frame so far this season. That's not good. And especially because Dallas plays very, very well in most of their games in the first period, and that included tonight in Vancouver. They score on the power play. Joe Pavelski gives the Stars a nice 1-0 lead going into the first intermission. Not the biggest lead, but, nice to go in with the lead nonetheless. Momentum was really kind of in their favor. They were playing very well. Anton Hudobin was playing well. The team seemed to be clicking. There was a lot of really good things happening on the ice. And then penalties, so on and so forth in this game, but also just in other games too. The second period has been a nightmare for the Stars so far this season. It's just an area where their momentum goes to die. Any momentum that gets built in the first period just seems to vanish for the Stars once the second period gets rolling. And hockey's really just a game built on momentum and opportunities, and Dallas is getting less of those in the second period. Other teams are getting momentum there, and that momentum can carry over into the third period and ultimately carry a team to the end of the game. Dallas in last night's game, Sunday night's game, was outshot 16-8 and outscored 4-1 against Vancouver in the second period. Just terrible, giving up 3 unanswered goals, I believe, before scoring their own, and then giving up, of course, the 4th goal. Again, just something you can't expect to win games while playing like that. And this team, has yet, I still believe, to put together a full 60-minute, time frame of hockey, win or lose, where you can, the team can look at themselves, where we as the fans can look at them, where the coaching staff can look at this team, and we can say, hey, despite what the scoreboard says, you guys played a full 60 minutes of hockey tonight, and came away, we can be pleased with how you guys played despite the result. We still haven't seen that. Man, I thought after that first period that we might, have an opportunity to get that. And then Dallas wets the bed, for lack of a better term, in the second period against Vancouver. And Dallas, and the last thing I want to touch on, that, is a negative for the Dallas Stars that, it's kind of one of those things you don't really notice until it negatively affects your team, was just Dallas' performance in the faceoff circle. They lost by a pretty substantial margin. I actually don't have the numbers written down. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they lost by a pretty substantial margin in the faceoff circle, which is very unlike Dallas. They've either dominated the faceoff circle in their games so far this season, or it's been pretty 50-50, even split. But there was a pretty substantial lead for the Vancouver Canucks in the faceoff circle, which I think hurt Dallas. And some of those power play goals that Vancouver scored came as a result of winning faceoffs in their offensive zone, getting a pass out and quick goal. Some of their power plays, I believe their first two, the first one was scored in like 6 seconds. And then the second one, I think, was less than 30 seconds or maybe less than a minute that they scored on their second power play opportunity. And so I don't think that's going to be an issue long-term for Dallas. Like I said, they've been very good in the faceoff circle so far this season. I guess Vancouver was just really in the zone tonight. Again, don't think this will be an issue long-term for Dallas, but I think that played a factor in this game. Like I said, it's a small detail that, can go unnoticed or unacknowledged at times, but it can make a big difference in a hockey game, depending on how you win your faceoffs or how you compete in your faceoffs, either in your defensive zone, but also in the offensive zone. If there's icing or a save from the opposing team's goalie, you have those opportunities to win a faceoff in the offensive zone, set your offense up, and get a scoring opportunity. And Dallas just wasn't winning as many faceoffs in Sunday night's game. And I think that hurt them. Not ultimately the reason why they lost, but it definitely contributed in stockpiles on top of the other things that I previously mentioned. Coming up next, I don't want this episode to be all negative, so I'll talk about a few of the things that I did like from Sunday night's matchup with the Canucks. But before we do that, I want to take a moment and say thank you to the sponsors of today's episode. The first of those being DirecTV. Today, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all of the entertainment that you love without the hassle. DirecTV Stream brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, which means you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. And the best part, there's no annual contract. So stop waiting and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. Today's episode is also brought to you by Indeed. Indeed is a hiring partner that gets you what you really want, a short list of quality candidates as fast as possible, because you can do it all. Attract, interview, and hire all at Indeed. Don't struggle on your own to find quality candidates. Indeed can help you hire the right people right now. Indeed partners with you on every step of the hiring process, so you can find talent with the skills you need through tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. Pick what skills are important to you from over 135 assessments and get a clear view of your top talent's abilities faster. Assessments make the interview process smoother for everyone. Talent doesn't need to prove themselves again, and you can dive deeper into talking about what's important to you. With Indeed assessments, you can reduce hiring time by 12%, according to Indeed data worldwide. Get started right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Get a $75 credit at Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer valid through December 31st. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Next on today's episode of Locked On Stars, your first listen of the day, want to take a quick moment and run through some positives from Sunday night's game against the Vancouver Canucks. This list is not as long as the previous list of the negative things that happen, but despite the disappointing loss that makes me physically sick to think about, could be the game, could be the slight cough that I'm fighting with the weather changing here in Texas, giving me a little bit of a cold. Up to you what's actually making me physically sick, the Dallas Stars against the Canucks or the weather. There were a few good things to take away from Sunday night's game. And the first of those being Dallas did make the goalie for Vancouver work. Thatcher Demko had a pretty good night overall despite giving up 3 goals. But man, especially in that first period, they were making him work. Thatcher Demko was absolutely fighting for his life in the crease because Dallas was having some really, really good opportunities, really good shots on net, and not just shots on the goal, but they were difficult shots to defend. There was one, it looked like, from the outset that Jamie Benn had a clear shot at the goal. Thatcher Demko makes an incredible diving save. It was really cool to see, even though Dallas only comes away with 1 goal in that first period, man, Thatcher Demko, like I said, was absolutely fighting what seemed like every second of the way through that period. And I wish we could have seen more of that later on in the game, but I feel like we just saw less of that, less aggression from the Stars in terms of what kind of shots they were taking. Because I think in the first period, and even the power play goal that was scored by Joe Pavelski was nice because Dallas was creating so much chaos and traffic around the net. I think that was part of what, that will make any goalie have to work very hard. And especially in that case, the puck's moving back and forth because of all the good passing from the Stars. Of course, they were on the man advantage on the power play in that instance, so it makes it a little easier. But that was something I really like to see, and I hope Dallas can carry that over into their next few games. Passing the puck a lot, creating a lot of chaos and traffic in front of the net, distracting the goalie, kind of keeping him on his toes, but also, keeping him in a position where you have the advantage over him, and you have the physical advantage, but also the mental advantage of, you might see something as a forward or a defenseman that he doesn't see. And so hopefully we can see Dallas kind of build on that on their first power play goal that they scored against Vancouver. Hopefully we'll see that in some of these next coming games that they'll play. And speaking of goalies, I will say overall, it was a nice night for some nice highlight plays by both goalies. Like I mentioned, Thatcher Demko had that really nice diving save in the first period. Anton Hudobin Not a great night, giving up 5 goals. The 6th goal that Vancouver scored was off an empty net. Yeah, I will say, would have loved to have seen Braden Holtby in the net last night for Sunday night's game. Just revenge game against Vancouver, despite only playing 1 season there. But I don't know. I feel like that even if it doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot to him or the city of Vancouver, maybe it might have been a little bit more to Braden Holtby. I don't know, because they bought out his contract and got rid of him after 1 season. I just feel like maybe he would have risen to the occasion and played maybe his best game of the season. That's, of course, speculation in my head. I have no proof for that. And I think I was fine. I mean, Anton Hudobin played pretty well in Calgary, so I can understand wanting to start him. Or maybe they're wanting to keep Holtby fresh for this homestand. Would have loved to see that. That's kind of besides the point. But some nice highlight plays by the goalies overall. Hudobin, despite a pretty bad night in the crease, had some really nice, impressive saves. Could have, kept the game from being a lot worse than it was, even though 6-3 is pretty bad. Yeah, I mean, it was positive. I mean, if I'm going to stay up till midnight to watch a hockey game, may as well get some entertaining highlights out of it. And we absolutely got that from the goalies. And even some of the goals that were scored for both teams were pretty nice, especially Dallas's 2 power play goals. The power play continues to stay hot despite Dallas's presence in the win column being very, very shaky and inconsistent. If there's one thing that we can cling to right now, it's that the power play is buzzing and it's doing very well. I think that's 4 games now in a row. I could be wrong. I believe it's 4 games in a row now that the Stars have scored at least once on the power play. They do it twice on Sunday night in Vancouver. Joe Pavelski in the first period with the help of Jason Robertson and Rupe Hintz. Again, really nice movement with the puck results in a nice look for Pavelski right next to the net. And then later in the game, Dallas, at the end of the second period, gets 4 minutes on the power play because of a double minor penalty against Vancouver. They only get like 20 seconds of it in the second period. It carries over into the third, and it seemed like, that power play was going to go to waste. It was a pretty sloppy power play overall from Dallas, but they came through at the end. And Ryan Suter puts a nice shot on the net that bounces off Jamie Benn, goes in the net. And at the moment, it was nice to give Dallas some momentum to get back in the game because they were down 2-4, made the game 3-4. But of course, Dallas, as I mentioned earlier, could not hold on to momentum for very long whenever they had it in this game. But the power play, it's coming back for Dallas. It was off to a rough start early on in this season, but the Dallas Stars seem to be finding their way a little bit on the man advantage. And hopefully that's something that they can improve while also finding ways to keep their penalty kill nice and efficient and consistent as well, because that is an aspect of their game that they're missing over these past few matches. And hopefully we'll see that return as the Stars return home this coming week, which we'll talk about in the next segment. But before we do that, I want to take a moment and say thank you to another sponsor of today's episode, and that is Built Bar. It's the holiday season. That means Thanksgiving and Christmas are here. My absolute favorite time of the year is this holiday season. Love spending time with family and friends at Thanksgiving, Christmas parties, around Christmas time. And I mean, it's fun to see all those people, but also this time of year means some of the best food and tastiest treats around. And there's plenty of them to go around. But maybe you want a yummy dessert that isn't so full of calories and sugar. Well, it's the perfect time for Built Bars. Built Bar is the new holiday dessert. You can feast on something delicious and feel good about it. One slice of pie has upwards of 300 calories, and that's on the low end more often than not. Most Built Bars are only 130 calories and only 4 grams of sugar, with plenty of protein. Replace the coconut cream pie with a coconut Built Bar, or go for a raspberry Built Bar instead of that raspberry pie. Lots of great flavors to choose from that can replace any pie. You can go to Built.com right now and use promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 at 15% off for 15% off at Built.com. And to close out today's episode of Locked On Stars, just kind of want to take a moment and talk about what the Dallas Stars need to do besides take a deep breath as they get ready for their next game. That'll be on Wednesday night against the Nashville Predators at home. An absolutely huge game, a very pivotal game. As Dallas, like I said, they're looking to gain some ground and get back into the thick of things with some of the top teams in the Central Division. Minnesota, St. Louis, and even Nashville and Winnipeg. Winnipeg for sure, and then even Nashville, I feel like, has kind of been a surprise this season, being kind of there in the thick of things in the Central Division, while Dallas and Colorado are kind of hanging out towards the bottom, which I feel like a lot of people probably expected with Dallas, but Colorado definitely kind of shocking people right now with being near the bottom of the Central Division standings. Of course, a lot of season left to play, so that is likely to change. But yeah, it was unfortunate that Dallas couldn't come away with 2 points because that would have given them 12. They wouldn't have passed anyone in the standings because Nashville has 13. But it still, keeps things interesting as far as Dallas, looking to fight and compete with some of these teams in the Central Division. And they have several games coming up against division opponents. Like I said, Wednesday against Nashville. And they're not too far out from playing some games against St. Louis, Minnesota, and Colorado. So disappointing to see the team fall short. But like I said, the team, they have a big week ahead of them with some games at home. And it's a nice opportunity for Dallas to catch their breath a little bit because they have really been playing on the road pretty much this entire season so far. They've only had 3 home games. They're 1-2 at home right now. I guess 1-1 because the Vegas game was an overtime loss. So they've, gotten a taste of everything as far as wins, losses, and overtime losses so far this season at home. But they haven't really had too much time consistently at home. Obviously, they had a few weeks back, a game against Vegas and then a game against Ottawa. But other than that, there just hasn't been a whole lot of time for them to rest and be in Dallas for an extended period of time. And they're finally going to get that being, pretty much home for the next week where they don't have to travel or go anywhere super far. And I think that will bode well for them. And I think that's going to play a factor in some of these games. One, to just have the hometown fans on their side, at their back, supporting them while they're on the ice. But also just that mental, edge of, you're at home, you don't have to worry about traveling because, when you travel, especially as if you're not fighting enough ailments with physically on your body as well, it can just mess with you mentally being away from home. And it can just be a drag. So I think Dallas will benefit, one, playing teams that, they can compete against and hopefully, win at least 2 of these 3 games while at home. Would be nice to see them win all 3 as they play Nashville, Philadelphia, and then Detroit at home. But we'll have to see what happens. I think some things that they need to work on that we touched on earlier. I think the penalty kill is a big thing that Dallas needs to put some emphasis on going into their next game. I feel like I've kind of been saying the past few game recaps. The penalty kill has looked a little bit shaky, but that I don't think it'll be a long-term issue. And as of now, it's kind of looking like it might be a long-term issue. And so I hope that the coaching staff and the players get back to work, hit the ground running whenever they have their next practice session, and that they look to get back right on the penalty kill because I think that was such a pivotal part of their game early in the season. And that was what was keeping them in some of their games was their ability to, beat the man advantage that the opposition would have. And they're, the power play is playing very well. And if they can get the penalty kill working, then this team has the opportunity to be very, very good and put themselves in positions to win a lot more games. Because a lot of times the NHL is a game of momentum, but it's also a game that can be determined by special teams. And Dallas is playing really well on one side of special teams and not so well on the other as of right now. And speaking of penalty kills, a way to help that is to commit less penalties. And I feel like that's not really something that you can practice. Maybe there is. I personally have never played hockey, so I don't know what a hockey practice is like. But the Dallas Stars just need to be more disciplined and find better ways to play defense and approach their games without committing as many penalties. I understand penalties are a part of the game. They're going to happen. It would be ridiculous of me to, demand that the Stars play, clean hockey every single time they take the ice. Penalties are going to happen. But ideally, maybe you're sitting at 2 or 4 penalty minutes instead of 12 because teams are going to take advantage of that. Especially the good teams in Vancouver, not necessarily a good team, not necessarily a great team. They're a good team, but not a great team. But we saw what a good team can do whenever they have opportunities. They scored 3 times out of 6 on the power play. You look at a team like Edmonton that has a really good power play unit. Who knows what they could do with that kind of opportunity? So Dallas needs to clean up their act a little bit because that'll help the penalty kill a lot because they won't have to have as many penalty kill opportunities. And also just helps the team establish a little bit more momentum. Penalty kills the momentum, kills the good vibes that the Dallas Stars are trying to build on the ice. So again, that's something that I hope gets fixed, especially here in this homestand. It's a good place to kill those nasty habits of committing all those penalties. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Stars. Be sure to tune in tomorrow as I get you filled in on some more insight surrounding the Dallas Stars as they kind of take a break and catch their breath before this matchup against Nashville on Wednesday. Thank you for making Locked On Stars your first listen of the day. Now go make your second listen of the day, the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with host Scott Cullen as he leans in on his years and years of hockey experience and insight to help you be the best player in your fantasy hockey league. His show is free and available on all platforms that you get your podcast at. Be sure to subscribe and follow the Locked On Stars podcast. Tell your friends about the Locked On Stars podcast if they're needing some more Stars content in their lives. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Dane_Lewis. That's at DANE_Lewis. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Stars. Thank you guys so much for listening. I truly do appreciate it. We will see you back here tomorrow for another edition of Locked On Stars. Have a great day, Stars fans.